today I'm going to be talking about a subject that is very close to me. I'm going to be talking about corn. And why I'm going to be talking about corn is because I've been around corn my whole life. We raise corn, and corn is a huge industry in Nebraska. And I believe that corn is an agricultural giant. And so today I'm going to explain to you why that is. And we're first going to go over some of the pests in corn that through every year they got to go through, and corn gets damaged by. And then we're going to go over the different growth stages of corn from when it first comes out of the ground until when it's fully matured. And then finally we're going to talk about why corn is such an ag giant and why and what we use corn for today. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about pests in corn. And we're first going to be talking about the armyworm and all of the pests that I found, and I'm going to talk about they came out of they are recorded. This information is according to a book written in 2012 named Field Crop Insects, and it was published by Iowa State University Extension. The armyworm, it's a foliar feeder, and it feeds on the whorl. And the whorl is at the very top of the corn plant, and at the very beginning it's just like all the leaves are in a whorl shape, and the tassel is inside the whorl. And so if the armyworm feeds enough on the whorl, it can kill the tassel, creating that plant. It will not be able to pollinate or reproduce. Bill bugs are the next pest I'm going to talk about. The bill bug attacks a plant at a very critical stage, or the beginning stage of its life. It is at ground level or below ground level. And when they do this, it can cause it to wilt and potentially die. Also, if a bill bug gets into your crop right away, it can cause that plant to tiller. And tiller is when you got more than one plant coming out of the same spot, and that's not a very desirable trait. The next pest we're going to talk about is the corn aphids. In corn aphids, they feed on the sap of the corn plant, and that sap and the phloem, and it is seen. Okay, and most damage from aphids is not very severe unless your corn is suffering through some drought situations. Then we're going to talk about the earworm. And everyone in here, I believe, has seen an earworm. Whenever you're eating sweet corn or shucking sweet corn, you'll see a worm here or there, and you can see all the damage on the kernels. And that is what an earworm does. It eats the kernels, and it can tunnel through the silks, also leaving those silks unable to reproduce. And then we got grasshoppers. And grasshoppers, everyone usually knows what those are, and they can eat all of the leaf, consume all of the leaf but the midrib. And they can also go through and eat through the husks and damage some kernels. So now we are done with all the pests, 5 of the pests that affect corn through its life cycle. And here we have some pesticides, some insecticide, and that can take out grasshoppers, and it can also take out, just your earworms and stuff like that. And that's just one example of something that you can prevent these pests with. So now we're going to move on to the different growth stages of corn. And when we talk about the different growth stages, I'm going to be referring all of my information to a book written in 2011 named Corn Growth and Development, published by Iowa State University Extension. And we start with the first stage of vegetative emergence. And this happens and vegetative emergence is when you see the first little bit of foliar plant or any part of the plant coming out of the ground, and a plant can live on the endosperm in that seed for 12 to 14 days. And so it doesn't need, near as much moisture. And then we go on to V1 through V6. And V1 is when you see the first leaf come and is unrolled, and it remains, and growing point remains under the ground until V6. And then V6, the growing point will emerge out of the ground, and then it will start creating nodes. Moving on to V12, more water and nutrients intake are required at this point because all energy is focused on reproduction. V18 to V20, a plant finishes its vegetative growth here at this point. And so we're looking at a V18 to V20 plant here. It's done growing, and height-wise, all nodes and internodes are elongated, and its final height is there. At VT, that is called vegetative tassel. It is fully unrolled. You can see here it is way past BT. It is fully unrolled, and when it's fully unrolled, you have 7 days of good pollen going to your silks. And then we move on to the first reproductive stage, which is R1. And this stage is when you see any first signs of silks. And silks are right here on your corn plant. And you'll see your silks coming out of your shoots. And the silks, when you first see silks, they are viable for 5 to 14 days. R2 is a blister stage. And this happens 10 to 12 days after silking. Clear liquid or clear water is filling into these kernels, and the final length of the ear is well, the corn plant knows how long that ear is going to be when it is done. R3 is a milk stage, and this happens 18 to 20 days after you see silks. Kernels can be aborted at this point. R4, 24 to 26 days after silks, and this is called the dough stage, so that milky substance inside the kernels has now turned into a doughy paste. You'll see yellowing of kernels and the flattening of the tops of your kernels. R5 is a dent stage, and here you will see where the flattening of the kernels are. It will start to dent in, and that's why it's called dent, and that happens 31 to 33 days after you see silks. And most of what's happening here, no longer can kernels be aborted, but all that you are focusing on is starch accumulation here. And so if you have any stress, the same amount of stress as it before that would affect the plant's yield, now the same stress will affect the plant more, because starch is what you get all your test weight off of, and it will affect your yield dramatically. R6 is when you are finally matured, and that happens 64 to 66 days after silkings, and that is called the black layer. So we have discussed all of our growth stages in corn, and now we're going to move on to the final part of this presentation, and that is, why is corn such an agricultural giant, and what do we use corn for? According to a website wrote in 2012 named NE Corn Kernels, that is split up into 3 main things that we use corn for: livestock, value-added products, and exports. Livestock, 40% of all United States corn is used for livestock. Nebraska itself, the corn industry is a $7.5 billion industry, and 14% of all Nebraska corn is fed to livestock. So, Nebraska is a great economic leader, and corn is a great economic leader in Nebraska, helping everybody else out. And then we move on to value-added products. In 2012, 24 ethanol plants were around in Nebraska. They could hold up to 2 billion gallons of ethanol, and they would consume 700 million bushels of corn a year. And they would, and out of making ethanol comes distillers, and they make 6 million distillers, 6 million tons of distillers, and that is a high protein feed for all livestock that we eat today. And another value added one is corn sugar. It is just like regular sugar. It breaks down the same, and it is practically the same thing as just your normal table sugar. And then move on to exports, and exports are divided into 2 systems: foreign exports and domestic. So foreign would be all over the world, and domestic would be here in America. And so California would be a domestic, and they consume 145 million bushels of corn for livestock, and that's yearly. And then foreign would be 6% of corn. Oh yeah, foreign would be like over to Mexico, and Mexico consumes 6% of corn, and they get that through train. So today we talked about different pests in corn, and we talked about all of the growth stages through corn, and we talked about why is corn so important, what we use corn for. I'd like to thank you all today, and I hope that you've learned a lot, and I hope you see that corn is an ag giant too. Thank you.